Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a librarian at the Cosby Library and Community Commons, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make apple jam. This is one of the recipes that I demonstrated during our freezer jam and quick pickles program. We did that program virtually right after the big ice storm, and so some people were not able to join us, and I thought I would put up a few videos with some short demonstrations so that those of you who couldn't attend can still sort of get an idea of what we talked about and maybe try this on your own. I went into this program thinking that the cooked jams, which this is going to be a cooked jam, were going to be more difficult than the ones that use added pectin, but I actually found that I liked the cooked jams better. And the two that I tried, the strawberry and this apple one, they both set up really well. So I hope that this encourages you to try both the cooked jams and the pectin jams. I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and then I'll do a little bit more talking about jams in general and some basic concepts. So what I have here are 2 pounds of apples. I used Gala apples this time. You can use whatever apples you think might taste the best for your jam. So that's about 4.5 to 5 apples, kind of depending on the size of your apples. Basically, you want it to cover the bottom of your pot. And then I'd added 1.5 cups of water. And I'm going to now put that on to boil. So you want to bring it to a low boil, and then I'm going to let this cook until the fruit has become tender and the mixture has reduced to about 1/4. That's going to be kind of hard to tell. So basically you want to let it go for about 15 minutes. Now I'm not going to do that all on camera, but I do want to talk a little bit about the concept of jams, what's sort of going on in this pot, and how this differs from number 1, canned jams, and number 2, the pectin jams, since I am going to have a separate video on how to do a pectin jam. So we call this a freezer jam because we're not going to can it. So canning is a whole other process that preserves your jam or your jelly or your pickles or whatever it is that you're canning and makes it shelf stable so that you don't have to put it in the refrigerator. But this jam, we are not going to can it. So you will have to refrigerate it. It will last in the refrigerator for about 2 weeks, or you can freeze it for up to a year. And so what most people do is they have several small containers and they portion up their jam into the small containers and they freeze some and then they leave some in the fridge. And it really doesn't take much time at all for the jam to defrost. So it's really quite convenient as a way for storing jam for quite a long time, and it's fresh homemade jam and you know exactly what's in it. And you can make flavors that you might not find in the store, depending on your favorite fruit. So with this jam, apple contains a lot of pectin. So pectin is naturally found in some fruits. It may be in all fruits, just in different amounts. I did look up some stuff about the chemistry of pectin, and it just didn't stick in my mind. So if you want to know more, please feel free to look up all the chemical properties of pectin, but basically what you need to know is that pectin is the stuff that makes the jam jammy, basically. And it does require a fairly high amount of acidity to work well, so later on we're going to be adding lemon to this mixture to help that pectin form. But just know that apples naturally have a lot of pectin in them. Lemons also have a naturally high amount of pectin. Some fruits do not have much pectin, and so that's why you might want to use the pectin added recipes. And so you can buy pectin, and one of the brands you will find a lot is called Sure-Jell, and so that's what it looks like. And I'll be showing you in another video how to use that, but we're not going to add any here because apple already has a lot of pectin in it. And one of the tips I got during the class was one of the jam makers there said that she sometimes will add like maybe 1/2 an apple to a mixture where the fruits maybe don't have enough pectin in them on their own to form a nice jam. So that's sort of the way that she gets around using fruits that don't have a lot of pectin and still doesn't have to add any added pectin. That powdered pectin that I'm going to show in another video has a very tart, lemony flavor, and so it can kind of change the flavor of your jam. And so what people use that pectin for is recipes where you don't cook the fruit at all. So this cooking process is also going to bring that pectin out and release it to where it can activate with the acidity in the mixture and form that jammy texture. So I'm going to go ahead and let this cook for a little while, and I will be back once we're ready for the next step. Okay, so my mixture has been cooking for about 15 minutes. I think you can tell that the water has reduced somewhat. At this point, I'm going to start breaking up the apples, and I did already start before I started filming, but I'm going to start breaking up the apples using a potato masher. They should start to be tender enough that you can do this. And I have to do this a few times during cooking. As the apple chunks get smaller, they'll of course cook faster and you'll be able to break them up more. You're not trying to make applesauce. You do want there to be chunks because this is a jam, not a sauce. So you'll want to just do this periodically throughout the cooking process. And then once you're ready, you will add a cup of sugar. So sugar is also an important part of the pectin chemical reaction, or the pectin formula, if you will. So the sugar, the acidity, the pectin, the naturally occurring pectin in the apples, that is all going to work together to bind the mixture together and create that jam texture that you're looking for. I should have mentioned earlier that I will be including a link to this recipe in the description. This comes from delish.com, and I will also include a link to the strawberry jam recipe that I really liked, that I think also worked really well. So this jam will set up pretty much without any effort. This is like the easiest beginner jam, and you should have good success with it. The strawberry jam, according to the recipe, is more temperamental and may or may not set up. Part of that has to do with the fact that sometimes strawberries have a lot of sugar in them. Sometimes they have a little bit. You probably know this yourself, that sometimes strawberries you get from the store are nice and sweet, and sometimes they're not. And that can change whether or not the pectin will set up, whether or not you get that chemical reaction that you need for your jam to set. So sometimes your strawberry jam, for example, might end up kind of runny, or your jam that you make using the added pectin comes out runny. But I find that that's not really a problem because there's so many uses for this jam. You can put it on oatmeal, you can put it on ice cream, you can use it as a topping for pancakes. So even if your jam comes out runny, I just think of it as a sauce at that point, and I just pour it over anything that needs a little added sweetness and a little bit of fruit flavor. So don't feel like you have to throw it away if it fails. It's still a success. It'll still be edible. It's still safe to eat. It just doesn't have the texture maybe that you were looking for, and you'll just need to practice again. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that the amount of sugar that you need with a cooked jam is much, much different than the amount of sugar that you will need for a pectin added jam. So in the pectin box, and again, I will show this to you again later in the other video if you choose to watch that one. But in the pectin box, there is a little insert that gives you a chart for how much sugar you have to add for different kinds of fruits. And so this one actually doesn't even list apple, probably because apple has just so much pectin that you don't need to add any more pectin. But strawberry, for example, so 4 cups of strawberries, you would reduce that down to 2 cups of crushed strawberries, and you would add 4 cups of sugar. That's a lot of sugar because you're not cooking the strawberries at all, so the sugar's kind of not coming out of the strawberries. There's no kind of reaction to get whatever pectin there is out of the strawberries. You have to add a lot of sugar to get this pectin to react and to set up into a jam. Again, this is just my very basic understanding of the science of all this. But with your cooked strawberry recipe, you're going to need a lot less sugar. So we only added a cup of sugar to this whole big batch of apples right here, and it's still going to set up very nicely into a jam. Now at this point, I'm going to keep stirring occasionally. I'm going to keep breaking up my apples into smaller pieces. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for that jammy texture to emerge. So this might take 20 or 25 minutes, and I will come back and show you what it looks like once we have achieved that texture, and we will add in our last few ingredients. Alright, so we are not there yet, but I wanted to show you, I'm going to bring the pan forward here a little bit so that you can see. I wanted to show you what it's starting to look like sort of halfway through, but see how much liquid, like immediately when I push some of the apples to the side, a lot of liquid still comes out. I'm waiting for that not to happen anymore. So you can see that that sort of jammy texture is developing, but I've still got a fair way to go. So I wanted you to be able to see the difference between this and when we finally are at the final stage of our jam being totally cooked. So I will return when we're at that stage. Okay, our jam is progressing nicely. I'm going to go ahead and move it up again so you can see what has happened here. So now when I move, there we go, when I move the apples out of the way, you can see that there's not really that pooling of liquid so much anymore. There is still some liquid that's coming out, but we still have a little bit of cooking left to go. So I'm not too concerned about that. So it's at this point that we're going to add our lemon to lower the pH, raise or increase the acidity. So that's kind of, I hope my wording is not confusing. We basically want to make this mixture more acidic. And so in order to do that, we're going to add lemon juice, and this can be either bottled or fresh. A lot of advice that I saw online actually suggested that you use bottled, because the bottled has a more consistent acidity, and a fresh lemon might not have the correct acidity. It might be more or less acidic than what you really need. So it is more reliable to use the bottled variety and more convenient in my mind. So you're going to use 2 tablespoons, and it feels like I'm getting to the end of this bottle here, so hopefully it looks like I'm going to have just enough. I'm just shy of that, so I'm going to go ahead and hope that this works, and you know what, it probably will, because this is a very forgiving recipe, which is why, again, this is a great recipe for beginners. So I'm not going to be too concerned about that. I'm going to go ahead and stir my lemon in. And then I also want to add any spices at this point. So this one, the original recipe just called for a cinnamon stick. And that is how I did the demonstration one that I did during the program, but because I have a lot of that still, I'm going to experiment a little bit. So I am still going to use 1 cinnamon stick, but the cinnamon that I bought is not the best quality, so I didn't want to spend a lot of money, and I bought kind of a cheaper grade of cinnamon. But if you use good cinnamon, you can probably just use 1 stick. I find that with this lower grade cinnamon, this more bargain cinnamon, I had to use 2 sticks to really get it to infuse and really get much flavor. But also what I'm going to try, because I am kind of a lazy cook and I don't like to measure a lot of stuff, and I also don't have a very sophisticated palate, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a sprinkle of pumpkin pie spice, which is a mixture of cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, ginger, mace, and cloves. So I'm just going to add a sprinkle of that. And I'm going to add just a pinch of powdered ginger as well. So this is, again, one of those fun things that you can do with your own jam experiments. You can customize them to be however you want. And again, it's probably pretty unlikely that you're going to make something so disgusting and so hideous that you won't be able to use it for anything. Probably it's all going to be okay. So what will happen here is I'm going to mix this all together, and then I'm going to put it back on the heat for about 5 to 7 minutes to finish the last stage of cooking. And while it's doing that, we can talk about containers. So I'm going to put this back on the heat in just a moment, and we'll talk about what I'm going to put this in. So I have a few different containers here. Now, traditionally, you're probably thinking that this is going to go in a glass container of some kind, and that is certainly up to you if you do want to use a canning jar, an actual canning jar. We are not canning, so there's not really a reason to use a canning jar. The thing that makes canning jars special is this lid, that when you actually go through the process of canning, this is what forms the seal that makes your food shelf stable, that seals out all the bacteria that could cause deterioration and spoilage. So that's what's special about a canning jar. For this purpose, you can use any kind of jar that is refrigerator and freezer safe. So I actually wouldn't use a big jar like this. Number one, this jar is a narrow mouth jar. It's not a wide mouth jar. A wide mouth jar does not have this little indent right here. It's easier to fill a wide mouth jar, and it's easier to serve out of a wide mouth jar. You might have seen those like straight up and down little jelly jars. That would probably be a better glass jar option, or even the little mini canning jars. This is kind of big, so you'd have to have a lot of people in your house who really like jam to be able to go through all of this jam within 1 or 2 weeks in your fridge. What I prefer to use are these little disposable or Tupperware containers. You know, I reuse them over and over. I just wash them really good. So this is a Ziploc brand. I really like these. They have screw tops, so they seal really nicely. This is the Rubbermaid variety of the same kind of concept, so I like these as well. You can get these even cheaper, and they come in big multi-packs, and you just snap the lid on. And an even smaller version if you only want jam every once in a while as a special treat. These two are a little bit more fragile in the freezer. They can crack when you take them out and you're trying to open up the lid. If you're not careful, or if you drop them, they'll crack. But, you know, it's not that dangerous. They're just plastic. So it just means that you'll have to put your jam in another container and throw the original container away. So these two are a little bit more durable, and that's why I really prefer those. But all of these would be good options, or something similar, some other plastic container or glass container if you prefer, but there really is no particular need to use a real canning jar for this. Just, again, anything that is freezer safe, that can stand the heat of your jam, because with most recipes you'll be putting your jam directly into the containers while it's still pretty hot, so make sure that it's also heat resistant. And make sure that you will be okay with handling it going from the freezer into the fridge. You know, that's the other danger, is that you could drop a glass container and it could shatter. So these, I feel like, are a little bit safer. Let's move over here, and I will move my containers out of the way, and let's see what's going on with our jam, because I think we are probably pretty much there. This forward and we'll take a look. So it's taken on kind of a nice caramel color there with the spices. And from here, all I'll need to do, I'll need to scoop out this cinnamon stick. And then I will use a ladle or a spoon, some sort of utensil, of course, to fill my prepared containers. So I will go ahead and start doing that. And there is no special trick to this. It is very hot though, so do be careful. But all you will be doing with this, let me go ahead and move my camera a little bit. Just very carefully fill your prepared containers. And the only trick here is that you want to try to keep the edges of your container clean, because that will make your lid stick if the edges aren't clean. And then you do want to leave some room at the top if you're going to store these in the freezer, because your jam will expand. And really you only need to leave about a ½ inch at the top. So I've left a little bit more than that. But you want to take a paper towel and just clean off the edges here. And then for most of these cooked and pectin jams, you will leave the jam out at room temperature for maybe even more than 24 hours for the final set to establish itself. So it's still a little bit liquidy. This apple is probably going to set up within just a few hours. The strawberry, the recipe said it sometimes takes over 24 hours for the strawberry to fully set. I found that it took pretty close to 24 hours, maybe like 20 hours or so for the strawberry jam to set. So the pectin sort of develops over time and creates that final jam texture. And with some of these recipes, the set is still going to be kind of runny. So don't be surprised if it doesn't set like, say, store-bought jam, where it's just a really firm, kind of almost gelatin-like set. This is meant to be a little bit more fluid, but the apple does set up really well. I think you'll be really pleased with the results. I will go ahead and fill the rest of my containers. I'll let it set, and then I'll come back very briefly just to show you what it looks like when it has finally set and when it gets to its final texture. So here is my jam divided up into containers, and I did want to mention two other things that I forgot to mention before. One is that one last reason I like these cooked jams is because the recipes are much more flexible in terms of you can have them, you can double them, and you can sort of figure out how much to use of each ingredient. That's much, much harder with the added pectin because there is a very specific formula. You have one package of pectin, you need to add so much fruit and so much sugar and so much lemon perhaps to make it set that you really can't deviate too much. I suppose you could double the recipe, but most of the pectin recipes make a lot of jam. And so you can see here, I'm not exactly sure how much this is. This is maybe a little bit over 3 cups that I ended up with. And so with this recipe, you know, we used a pretty easy amount to have. So we used a cup of sugar. I could reduce that to a half a cup of sugar. I could reduce the amount of apples by a half, and then I could use just 1 tablespoon of the lemon juice, and I would end up with half this amount. Probably an amount that I could use maybe in a week or two, especially if I have family, and that might be a reasonable amount to end up with. So this is not quite set. I am going to let it sit out here on the counter for a little bit while longer, but I realized too that I forgot to mention that I'm not going to leave this jam to set uncovered. I am going to cover it. So it's still pretty hot at this point, and you can see that there is steam accumulating, condensation accumulating on the lids here. So I'm just going to very loosely put the lids on for a little while, and then I'm going to wipe them down with a clean dishcloth or with a paper towel. And then I will put the lids on fully, and I will let them sit for a little while so that the jam can fully set. And then at that point, it's going to be ready to put in the fridge or in the freezer. And so I will come back again and show you what that looks like, what that texture looks like. That was another thing that I realized when I was looking up YouTube videos about jam making, is that they never show what the texture of the final jam is, what the texture is that you're looking for. So I will show you that, and hopefully that gives you an idea of what the final product should be. Welcome back. Here we are the next morning. I let my jam sit out on the counter with the lid on for a few hours to set, and then I stored it in the refrigerator. Again, this is not shelf stable, so it does need to be either in the refrigerator or the freezer. And as you can see, it looks really nice. I've got my toast here. I spread that on, and looks delicious. Has a nice jammy texture, some nice chunks there. Has a good color. I did taste test it already, and I like the spices that I used, so that was a success. So I hope this gives you some encouragement to try some cooked jam. It's maybe not as hard as it might first appear. It's just a matter of are you going to get the consistency that you're looking for, and that may or may not be under your control. So I'd say go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. Again, the links to this recipe and to the strawberry one that I tested are going to be down in the description, and I hope you enjoy.